Since the National Executive Meeting in September, we had our annual general membership meetings. Paul and I toured around and met with the members and yourselves, and it seemed like we were having some really good talks with the membership. Members were quite interested in what was going on. In particular, they wanted to know about the budget reductions. They wanted to know about the review of the strike, how to make things better for future strikes, where we sat on the contracting in. We gave them some information on what they should be doing to help strengthen our contracting in fight back campaigns, and looking at bargaining, you know. So we talked about where bargaining was going with Treasury Board, but we also, you know, have groups like CFMWS that were in bargaining, and IMP in bargaining, and we have other groups as well, you know, that are coming close to their contracts with the private sectors, and so we were keeping up on that for sure. Then we moved on to our National Union Management Consultation Committee meetings and our HR subcommittee meetings. So it's a subcommittee of that national. And we discussed agenda items like salary wage envelope allocations. You know, how is it that local managers don't understand how salary wage envelopes are allocated? And so we talked about methods of being able to advise them on how that works and how to get everybody to have a clear understanding of what it is. It's kind of shocking that they take the training, they pass the training to be able to get their financial delegation, and then for some reason they are completely unaware of how the whole thing works. So we're trying to marry that up with national management and get that information brought down. We also talked about things like budgeting and getting them to understand how their budget works exactly. We talked about contracting in and how that is a result. The contracting out of our work is often a result of management not understanding how to budget and not understanding how their salary wage envelope works. So we also talked about the violence in the workplace investigations. There have been multiple designated recipients that have been telling members that they don't have the right to have an investigation, that they do it on their preliminary search and determine that there's no investigation needed. Well, that's wrong. They don't have that authority. The legislation says that they must do an investigation if the complainant requests one. And then they say that some of the designated recipients were thinking that they could go with internal investigators rather than external, that the default was to be internal, and it's, again, that is wrong. It's entirely up to the complainant to make the determination on whether they want an internal or external as well. So we also talk about things like public servants participating in D&D sanctioned events. So while I was on my tour during the AGMs, I found that there were numerous members that were not being allowed to participate, I don't know, in a volleyball tournament or in a softball tournament, or shockingly, even in a public service week celebration. At one base, they actually had the public servants watch the military play baseball. So during public service week appreciation, it was very bizarre. And needless to say, National Defense has agreed all the L1s at the top there, so the head of the Army, the Air Force, the Navy, all the ADMs agree that no waiver needs to be signed, that we're fully covered by insurance, and you don't need to take leave to attend a D&D sanctioned event. So this message should be getting through, but I guess my point is that it's meetings like this Union Management Consultation Committee that allows for those discussions to happen. And so that's something that I hope to impress upon you, to make sure that you are A, scheduling your union management consultation committee meetings, B, reviewing the minutes and making sure that they're accurate, and then sending them out with everybody, because this is where you're going to most likely get the best results that you need. And when you cannot come to an agreement, when you're not getting the outcomes that you're looking for, please send that up to your VP of the region so that they can send it up the chain of command to get it resolved. Another kick at the can there. It's very difficult for us to come to these national meetings and say things for the first time. Yeah. So another part that came up since we last met at convention was a budget reduction. National Defense announced that they were looking for a $950 million budget reduction. That's a lot of coin there. So they're telling us that there's not to be any job loss out of it, although they say attrition. Well, that is job loss, right? So unless they're going to actually remove the work, that means that they're contracting out, except that the department says that they want to take this $950 million from contracts and travel. So we've seen travel already get greatly reduced. Now they're looking at the contracts, and 80% of the contracting money is engineering, things like shipbuilding. It's that other 20% where they think that they can recover some of those costs. And so this is where we are begging you, please show us in your locals where that money can come from. Where does it make sense? Where are the contracts that are being done by contractors that could be performed better and cheaper by the public service? And I'm not just talking about work that previously was performed by public servants and are now done by contractors. I want you to scan all work. It may be that at some time back in the 60s, it made perfect sense to contract out some of this work. But now that we're in 2024, maybe those situations no longer exist. At the local UMCC, have those talks with the command structure and ask them, why are you doing this in contract? They're going to come back and say, sweet. For sure they're going to come back with that. They're going to say, why aren't you asking to convert it? Why not? The deputy minister can authorize conversion of suite. Then they're going to tell you it's a tax. There's an additional tax. Well, it's true. So 27 cents on every dollar. And that covers all of our benefits. That covers everything that is additional over and above what our annual salary is. But so what? Do the math. Does this make sense? Do you still need to have all of this additional work? Not just the cost of the contract, but the cost of having people reviewing the contract, letting the contract, inspecting the contract. Not saying we get rid of our contracts inspectors, everybody breathe easy. I'm saying, let's take a look. Some of the work that's being contracted out by National Defense makes very good sense and should be contracted out. Some of it doesn't. Let's figure out where we can bring in the work and try to push. Right now we have this opportunity with them breathing down their neck with trying to find this budget cut. So let's try to strike while the irons are hot. We also have the pay equity review that's going on nationally. It goes on throughout Treasury Board and all federally regulated employers. And so this is something to make sure that people are being paid appropriately. So those jobs that are predominantly held by women are often being paid less than men, than jobs that are being predominantly held by men, when those jobs are of equivalent value. So we are working, it's legislation that we have to do this review. It covers about 1.2 million workers in Canada. 895,000 of those are private sector employees. Another 375,000 are the public service. And so September 3rd of this year is when the employer is responsible for developing their plan and actually handing out the plan. This is how we're going to make sure that genders are being treated fairly. And then September 4th, that's when the increases in compensation have to happen. Okay, so MemberLink. PSAC is launching a new data program called MemberLink. You probably recall if you were at convention, we talked about it briefly there. And so this is going to allow local executive officers access to update all of their members' contact information. I know, just like you were doing with ULink. It's also going to allow you to view all the members in your local, like what you see on your mud sheet. I know, just like ULink. Here's the trick. It's going to allow you to email all of your members. Unlike ULink. And so this is going to be very helpful for you, and you'll be able to categorize, right? So you'll be able to take out based on classification. If you only need to speak to the Table 2 or SB or whoever, you know, this is going to allow that, and it's going to really help you with organizing. Once all the access rules are established, you are going to be provided with links to the membership link website, and local officers will be asked to register. Once you register, then we will also add tutorial videos on that you can access at any time. So if you're not going on it all the time and you're not sure exactly how it works, you'll always be able to review the tutorial video, and then we'll have, of course, an FAQ document, frequently asked questions document right on the website as well. So once you log in, if you're like, I don't want to watch a whole video, I just want to know this, that will be available to you too. So keep your eyes open. We are going to be sending that to your UNDE email address. And speaking of those addresses, I want to remind you at convention, we agreed to increase that number of email addresses, I think by 2 extra. So, used to work for GDI. They're the private sector cleaners, and they look after the base and the military family resource center, the daycare. They clean all over down there. And they went on a 4-month strike.
Oh my.
They started in August and ended in November, so they went from the heat spells to the freezing cold and everything in between there. And it was a really, really difficult bargaining time. But they were able to keep together and successfully come to a fair contract afterwards. And D&D learned their lesson off of that. And when that contract came up, they didn't get awarded it the next time. But instead what they did was they split that contract up into 3 different contracts. And they awarded it to 2 different employers. One is Dexterra, a big company. Another one is called Tour, and this is a company that is a family-run company. And they have numerous contracts with national defense elsewhere. I could think of in Montreal and in Halifax, I believe, maybe Greenwood. And so when we got into negotiations with these new contracts, it was a bit of a challenge. We were able to get some movement with Tour, but not with Dexterra. And so we were having some problems, but eventually we ended up with reasonable contracts, we'll say. Tour was a little bit better employer to work for. They had staff appreciation barbecues, something that was not something that they normally received down in Petawawa. And, you know, things were going pretty good until about last year. And then the pay wasn't quite coming in on time or as required. So their collective agreement says that it needs to be given every 2 weeks, and it needs to come as direct deposit. And direct deposit just makes it easier for everybody with their banking. And you can often reduce your banking fees if you have your paycheck come in as direct deposit. So it really benefits employees to have this. Well, all of a sudden, some people are getting paid by direct deposit. Some people were getting checks the next day. Some people were getting e-transfers. And then there was money coming in, going out, checks were bouncing. People's accounts started getting frozen. People weren't able to get paid at all. They weren't able to pay any of their bills. They started getting all these non-sufficient fund charges coming up. And throughout the year, it progressively was getting worse and worse. Now, of course, we filed a grievance, but this lousy Ontario government here has their rules that say that if you work for a union, you can't put in a complaint with the Labor Ministry about not getting paid. So they're stuck in the situation of just going through a grievance. And of course, the employer wasn't too interested in upholding their grievances. So of course, we had to go through the process to get it up to arbitration. And so we just got to arbitration in February, right the day after arbitration, no, the day before arbitration, right? Tour gives up the contract. After all the members hadn't been paid the week before, they were told, we're gonna pay you next week, and we'll give you $150 for your travel. And then when the next week comes, they just walk away from the contract. And National Defense still has contracts with these people. It is shameful. These are things that, this is why we need to have our contracting in campaign. These members don't deserve this. They're some of the hardest working members that we have. The lowest paid that there are, and now not paid at all. So we contacted the deputy right away and told him, hey, we need to bring these people into the public service. There's even people out there that were in the public service back in the thousands and are still working and are making the same amount of money that they made when they got laid off. So I want to hold up Chandra's Local as an example of why this is so critical, because this could happen with any of our work. This could happen anywhere where we are. And National Defense did nothing. And I just want to reassure you and everybody else here that this isn't over. We are still going to continue to go to the department. We're still going to continue to try to hammer them. You know, I have an appointment to be a witness at the Parliamentary Committee for National Defense next week. I'll be talking about it there as well. We need to have fair wages for all workers. workers. We need to have secure work for everybody, and we need to continue to build communities. And this lowest price bidder is just shameful that a government would take on such a thing. So that fight is not going away. And while we're talking about fights, I cannot leave here without mentioning CFMWS Day 40. Those NPF workers, this is the first time they've even voted on a strike, and overwhelmingly 94% strike vote, because they just cannot take it any longer. And here's the crazy thing about this. CFMWS are public servants. They are public servants. You, most of you that are public servants, are Schedule 1, they're Schedule 5. So that means that they don't have to follow the Public Service Employment Act. They have a waiver, a national defense waiver that says that they don't have to fall within the Treasury Board rules. And so these guys all have different wages from location to location to location. They all have a different collective agreement. They all get paid different. There's no standard classification, nothing. And the employer likes it that way. The employer will pay somebody $10 an hour more in Ottawa than somebody in Kingston doing identical work. $10 an hour. And 62% less in some jobs than what a public servant is earning in the core. 62% less. Who is CFMWS? They're National Defense. These are all run by the military. They have one CEO who always is an ex-military high-ranking officer. As soon as they retire, they get plopped into that position. Who does he answer to? A board of L1s. Who answers to the Chief of Defense Staff, who he delegates down to the Vice. But this is national defense, and it's absolutely shameful that they think that these members should be paid less than any other public servant. You know, when COVID happened, when the pandemic was first announced with all the restrictions, remember when the Prime Minister was on the radio telling everybody, please don't lay off your employees. We're going to give you some money. We're going to keep this country afloat. We're going to keep the economy going. CFMWS was on the phone with me telling me they're laying off everybody.
Oh my.
That's what their plan was. The government was laying off their own people. And so when they phoned me to tell me that, I said, oh no, you're not. And they were like, oh, we have to, June, you see our budget and we don't have any money coming in, so that we can't afford to pay for their salaries, so of course we have to lay them off. I said, well, when we hang up, I already have an interview with CBC scheduled. I'm just going to change the topic of that discussion, and we're going to talk about the federal government laying off public servants. Well, Prime Minister Trudeau's asking everybody not to. And they said, oh, no, June, you've got it confused. They're Schedule 5, they're not Schedule 1, you know, so it's not the same thing. So, well, that's okay, you can discuss that in the media and explain it to everybody, the differences. And so, I mean, fast forward, obviously they didn't lay everybody off. They did do layoffs. They did. And everybody who filed a grievance got their job back, but some of the members didn't want to file a grievance because they were making more money on the what was it called? Serve. They were making more money on Serve. We have members that have worked there for 10 years or more and are eligible to get welfare while they're working there.
Wow.
We have members that only get raises when there's minimum wage increases. But here's the ultimate kicker for me. Probably these two have other kickers that they'd like to add. But for me, the ultimate kicker is there's 3 different kinds of compensation groups at CFMWS. There's Cat 3s. That's that CEO I talked about and all their directors. There's Category 2s. That's all the supervisors and managers and specialists, as they call them. And then there's Cat 1s, and that's all the workers. So, and those are our members. And we don't represent all of the members. We represent about 700 roughly. Those Cat 1s are all being offered 4% a year for their pay increase, while they're giving the Cat 2s and 3s cost of living. 6.8% is what they got last year for their pay raise, but they can't afford to pay the Cat 1s. Isn't that shameful? Isn't that just disgusting? Federal government employees, and this is how they treat them. So this afternoon at noon, we're going down to do a march. It's not mandatory, but I hope you all come with us because we need to make sure that everybody is there. We need to make sure that they hear our voices loudly. And I need you to bring this message back to all of the members in your locals. When you see those picket lines outside, I want you to help them, to support them. We had a person in Kingston a couple of days ago hospitalized, sent in an ambulance because some jerk wanted to go work out and didn't care about hitting a person. They're taken away, he's released now, but taken away in an ambulance. Like, my goodness. The disdain that they have for people is shocking. So I hope that you all come with one final thing. I know I'm fudging up there, I'll be very quick. Phoenix pay damages. Nearly everybody that was paid by Phoenix Pay got about $2,500 a couple of years ago. They got tax taken off of it.
Yeah.
We told them that's not supposed to be taxed because it's an award. And we've been fighting back and forth. We've come to an agreement. $1,500 of that $2,500 was for general damages. Another $1,000, the final $1,000, was for the late implementation. So through negotiations of all this time, we finally have come to an agreement that that $1,500 of general damages will not be taxable. So if you recall, last year around tax time, we told everybody to file an objection. If you filed an objection with CRA or with the Quebec taxes, you will automatically have your taxes reassessed and get that difference back, whatever that delta is going to be. If you did not file the objection, despite our encouragement to do so, you can file a late objection. That's what it's called, a late objection. You have to file it by April 30th, 2024. That's a firm date. There's no extensions beyond that. You're going to get an email from PSAC if you're on their distribution list today. It's going to explain all of this. PSAC is going to have on their website an explanation of exactly how to file the late objection. They'll put all of this there for you. They're even going to have a link to the objection for you to be able to do it. But you have to do it. And the Quebec folk, you have to do it twice. Okay? All right, well, I'm getting the hook. I want to thank everybody for paying close attention. Please make sure that you complete your survey. This is critical on deciding where we're going to be going. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup.